Hey everyone, it's Austin Solomon, the Solomon Group at Coldwell Banker Action. Welcome to this week's episode of the Real Wausau Real Estate Show. Today we're talking about the market for buyers that are out of the area, specifically the larger cities where buyers are used to spending a lot of money to buy homes. What happens when those buyers start to move to the Wausau area? Can the sellers of homes in Wausau expect to get higher prices if the buyer is from one of those bigger cities? How has that changed over the years? So it's actually been interesting. One of the things that I've dealt with in the past, specifically mainly working with sellers, has been the thought that, well, if we can just attract a buyer that is from Chicago or from California or one of the bigger cities, Minneapolis, Milwaukee, that's used to paying a higher price, right? Then we should have no problem selling our home, which isn't a bad thought. I mean, that's legitimate, right? So if a buyer is used to, if the buyer's home is mediocre and it's worth $500,000 and they move to Wausau and a $500,000 house is far, superior than what they have, then it probably would be a little easier to pull the trigger on that. I think that's legitimate. Over the last couple of years, I think one of the things in that thinking that's a little bit off is that typically buyers that are looking in this market, they're just like any other buyer. And by any other buyer, they're comparing your house or our house to every other house that's in the market that meets their criteria. When a buyer does that, they use what's called comparison shopping, right? They compare one house to the other house to the next house, etc., and they weigh the pros and cons of each home. And the one common thing between all the houses is the price, right? So how does the price affect their thoughts? So they're still going to use a comparison approach and still going to weigh in the price, right? A buyer's not going to pay, $50,000 or $100,000 more than what the market would allow most of the time, if there are other readily available options that they can buy, right? Now, in the last year or two, what we've seen is there hasn't been a lot of options for buyers, right? So if there's not a lot of other readily available options, or there are some unique properties that aren't very common, what happens? Well, for the first time, and again, this last year or two, I've especially seen it on unique properties or homes that are superb and maybe have some unique features, where you do see buyers coming from some of the bigger markets, and you have a bidding war type situation, and those buyers are willing to pay a lot of money and a lot of times be the winning bid. So it has been interesting to see that, especially like this spring, I think I've seen it the most, in parts of last summer as well, where you'd see a buyer relocating to this area, and they're certainly willing to put forth the biggest and the highest offer. And I think part of the reason is because they are coming from a higher market, and it's a little easier for them to drop a little bit of money. And when you come from a really hot market like California, where homes are going way over asking price, right? It's a little easier to kind of go way over asking price here too. So I have seen those out-of-town buyers be willing to pay a little bit more and get the winning bids. So as a buyer and a seller, what do we do with that info, right? Well, as a buyer, right, in this market, you might be up against someone that is moving from out of the area, and sometimes someone that's willing to really go big on the price. I don't think there's anything you can do with that, or I don't necessarily think that's something you have to weigh in on every house, but something maybe to be cognizant of. As a seller, I think it's important to, when you are marketing your property, to be open. How do you appeal to buyers that are from out of the area? Well, I think having a proper amount of data, lots of pictures. The virtual tours are important, right, where people can interact, view the home as if they're there. All those extra pieces and snippets of information is helpful when you're trying to attract someone that's not here and maybe might not even come to view the home in person, right? So having those things and those tools available can certainly be beneficial in attracting those people. So as a seller, right, having those options available is important. So a few things just about talking about attracting buyers from bigger markets into our Wausau market.